An organization normally starts its GDPR activities by actually analyzing its business processes for personal information, and this information is then written down in the records of processing, and part of these records of processing are also describing the purpose of the information as a very important criteria. And not the least, you can find with the records of processing your high-risk personal information items that require a data protection impact assessment. Based on that, we come to the next activity, which is then to perform the data protection impact assessment for the high-risk personal information items and processes. This is a two-step process. First, you have to assign the risk value or an impact value based on the data from the data subject's perspective, and then you have to select the privacy and data protection and security controls that are actually helping to address those risks. When you have those controls, you need to get them to play together like instruments in an orchestra, and their data protection by design and by default comes in, because here you look how you coordinate and arrange the controls. You also do during that process some activities in relation to the data protection architecture, so that you get a complete picture there. And you're addressing data minimization. This is mostly in the business process area, because there you can easiest avoid personal information. After you have that, this is more the technical focus. You need to switch to the more soft controls to address the rights of the data subject, and that is processes and activities to get consent and manage consent, and also objections, but also all the information obligations an organization has now with the GDPR, and the obligations to forward or forget personal information. And that is a little bit different, because you leave the domain of IT and go into other areas of the organization, like service desks or support organization, which are dealing normally with that. In cooperation, of course, with technology, but there you need to have a broader focus. When you have that, you have kind of your internal focus done, or the control focus. You can then switch over to when certain things may happen, and that is the incident management. And the GDPR is pretty straightforward. You have to report data protection incidents within 72 hours to the Data Protection Authority. And here the necessary processes need to be in place, and that is, normally we have an incident process, but the first step would then be to identify if the incident actually contains personal information, and the second step is then to have, apart from the normal handling, also procedures to report that information according to the wishes of the Data Protection Authority, and in the worst case also the data subject. So having that, you have dealt with all the parts that focus on your organization, and you can move on to your external interactions, mainly with your suppliers and partners, from whom you either receive personal information or whom you make personal information available to. And there you have to sign data protection agreements in both directions. Either you are, when you outsource the information, you sign a data protection agreement with your supplier, or when you take in personal information, you sign that with the controller or the organization that has that. When you have that, you're more or less done with all the activities that you would need to do to implement that, but then you need to come to the accountability principle as the controller, and that requires you to either, by means of a data protection officer, perform audits, or you find other means, if you should not need a data protection officer, to actually do controls and audits so that you can show compliance and account for an appropriate handling. And this, in the end, then feeds back to all the other activities, like your records of processing or your risk impacts and so on, in a continuous improvement activity like we can see in the Data Protection Directive regulation.